I saw everything, no matter how poorly done it was, and not a great movie. I saw Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes, and I enjoyed that. And I saw like Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis, and anything I could see in the 90s and early 2000s, I would. And it was an escape for me. And that's why I started making movies, because I wanted to help other people find an escape, just a way to turn off your brain and just be entertained for 2 hours. And the thing about Flight Risk is I finally made a movie like that.
Mike, at long last, it's been a long wait, but we are more than thrilled to welcome back a two-time, a repeat guest on the O Brother podcast, cinematographer, producer, and third Nelms brother. He may be a third Nelms brother, but he's number one at the box office right now with his film Flight Risk.
Yep.
Welcome back to the show, the great Johnny Derango. How are you, my friend? Good to
Welcome
see you.
back, Johnny.
I'm great, guys. Good to talk to you again.
It's only been about almost 5 years since we talked to you.
It's crazy. It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
This was back, of course, when Fat Man had come out, and we've been raving about that ever since we talked to you back then. But um, so much to catch up on. You've been busy in that 4 or 5 years, and Red Right Hand is something we didn't get a chance to talk to you about. We, of course, had the Nelms
Right.
brothers on the show around the time of that release, but we never got to talk to you about that production. And we kind of wanted to, we got to get to Flight Risk. We got so much to talk about with the film,
Sure.
but wanted to, find out what your experience was on the Red Right Hand production. Was that your most challenging
We heard it
shoot?
was a difficult shoot in Kentucky, the storms and
The
whatnot. So,
conditions we heard were
yeah.
brutal.
Let's just say, yeah, it was not the easiest shoot I've ever done. That one had a lot of challenges, weather being the main part, and that took place. We shot that in the spring of 2022, and it was just a real challenge. I mean, you have things that you probably don't think about from the outside, but when you're in production, anytime there's a lightning strike within 6 miles, you have to turn off your generators for 30 minutes. And if you have to turn off your generators and you're lighting a scene, well, you got no lights, so you're down for a good 30 minutes. And every single time you have a lightning strike, after that, same thing, 30 minutes. So trying to make your days with weather is just, it's brutal.
And that came out, that was February of last year. And then a couple months later, Unsung Hero comes out, which
Right.
is a fantastic film. I know you've said how proud you are of the work in that film and in that production. Mike and I, we both own it. In fact, Mike, your copy is right behind you. You can see they're
Yeah.
sporting the Blu-ray or 4K there.
Yeah, it's right here. Blu-ray. I have no Johnny Durango 4K, so I'm hoping Flight Risk may be a potential.
Yeah, that might be the first one. I don't know if anything else has been released in 4K.
Yeah, not that I've found, and I've
You know,
looked.
it was yeah, it struck me because that opening in that film, there's a scene at the very beginning that features members, not the actual members, but this band Striper, which is
Hmm.
a for anybody that may not know, is like a Christian metal band, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
interesting, Mike, I don't know if I ever told you this. My best friend, I was the best man at his wedding, and his brother-in-law is friends with Michael Sweet, the singer of Striper, and he
Oh, that's
sang
cool.
at his wedding, and he was standing right beside me singing during the wedding. It was really kind of a crazy experience. So when that opening sequence comes on and it was Striper, it's like, oh my God, and the music in that film, the acting, it's it's such an endearing film with so many tender moments and very much the Johnny Durango look.
Yeah. Like,
Nice.
when I watched it, I'm like, your fingerprints were all over that. And really, I think the best parts of the movie, although I liked all of it, the best parts were the way you shot it, the colors, a lot of it. But, you know,
I appreciate that. That one was sort of that was a real special project to me for a lot of reasons, but that one was my first film away from the Nelms brothers in years. And those guys are geniuses. Esham will draw every single frame of every film that we've ever done. So when I'm working with them, I got to get there early in pre-production. I got to be on the scouts. I got to be super engaged, or he will go off at night and draw the frames, which leaves me just making suggestions on set and handling the lighting, which is fine. I love the lighting, my favorite part. But to be involved with the shots and the way the camera moves all the way through the movie is something that I hadn't done solo in a long time. So it was sort of a liberating experience for me moving into Unsung Hero. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's my fingerprints all the way through. I designed the arc of the camera movement, how it would go all the way through the movie, the lighting, how everything would change. The structure of that movie visually is my first departure from them in years. So it was fun because you don't know what is your style and what is the director's style and how they merge and how they meld. And so I got to take all my years of experience and sit down with two new directors, amazing guys by the name of Joel Smallbone and Richie Ramsey. And we probably sat down 2 hours a night every single night after we did 12 hours in the office during pre-production and talked through things, looked at references, and we went scene by scene and designed the look. And I'm just super proud of how that movie turned out.
And Joel, who's, you just mentioned, stars in it playing his dad, right?
He does, which is, he calls it a $6 million therapy session.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, with so many films on your resume now, I think you've got over 50 credits just from cinematography standpoint. But how would
Right.
you like Mike and I feel like now when we've seen all your films, we can recognize it. This is a Johnny Durango film to us. But how
Nice.
would you describe that to somebody else? Your aesthetic and the look of your films. What do you think is unique that stands out about it if you were to describe it to somebody else?
And we know on your Instagram page you have reels and you discuss, the differences, and it's really educating for people who want to learn about cinematography and, but yeah, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. No, it's okay. For me, it's my work is 100% story based, and my entire goal is just to create images that support each story individually. So I don't know that I have a style per se, because I want it to blend into whatever everything that I do, and I want them all to have, obviously they all have my DNA all over them, but they're all vastly different. I mean, if you look at Flight Risk to Red Right Hand to Unsung Hero, those are three movies that basically came back to back to back. And I don't think any of them look distinctly similar, but yet there's still something that is my feel. And I'm not exactly sure how to classify that or how to quantify it, but it's more of an emotional beat kind of thing.
Mm.
We recently looked at some David Lynch films because he just passed away, as you know.
Right.
And we watched Eraserhead. And I wanted to get your take on this because there was a quote either I read or I saw from him. He said, shooting black and white is really difficult. Shooting color, he said, was easy because the colors separate themselves. And you popped into my head instantly. I said, I don't know if Johnny would agree with that because of the way you blend and warmth and the way you
Hmm.
use color. So I don't want you
Yeah.
to throw David Lynch under the bus, but I instantly thought of you when I heard that quote.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I feel like if you want an Academy Award, you shoot a movie in black and white. Like every cinematographer who shoots a movie in black and white seems to get an Academy Award. It's very classy, it's very classic, and I think you can really sculpt interesting images in black and white. The thing is with color, you have to be careful with everything. Like you have color temperatures, you have to make sure the color temperatures work together. Back in the 80s and 90s, everything was every light matched in color, so it felt like, if you have a window that had the blue light, right, you would gel it orange so it matched the interior lights so that everything had a consistency. Over the last 15, 20 years, you've seen a big departure in that, especially when digital came in, where people are mixing colors. A lot of like sodium vapors and mercury vapor, so you get like the green and the orange juxtaposition. And people are not correcting things the way they used to. If you were on a city street in an 80s movie, every one of those globes on those street lights would be taken out so that they weren't that orange or that green, and they would all have a consistent uniform white color to them. These days, you get to play a lot more with colors, and I think it's really opened things up to be really interesting.
Well, Dan, I don't know if you have more questions, but it leads me to another
Mhm.
question dealing with flight risk. because I went to see it at my local AMC,
Mhm.
and they're pitching this new laser projection, and they had somebody,
Yep.
create like, dazzling colors and all this. Does that affect the way you shoot a film, knowing that it's gonna be laser projected, whatever that is?
So yeah, no, absolutely no bearing on what I do on set. But if you're gonna go see a movie, go see it in laser projection. Like the images of mine that I've seen in laser projection, vastly better than some of the other stuff that I've seen. So as an audience member, I will always try to go see a movie in laser projection if I can.
Okay.
So talk to us about Flight Risk. I just saw it last night, and I wish, and I may have to still go see it in 4DX. Did you have the experience to see it in 4DX?
So I did. I went a couple of weeks ago. They did out here as a marketing thing, which was amazing. They did a Mark Wahlberg Flight Risk lookalike competition that was sponsored by Manscaped, and the winners got these amazing Manscaped head shavers that are made for shaving your head. And it was the funniest thing in the world. But I was able to sit in on the screening, and it was 4DX, and it's wild, man. Like I was sitting there and I had my drink in my drink holder, and my drink actually lifted up in the air, and I caught it before it flew away. But it was so much fun. I mean, there's a scene in the movie, without giving too much away, where a flare is fired, and all of a sudden smoke started drifting down from the ceiling of the theater. So it's a pretty intense experience, and if you get a chance to see it, this is the kind of movie to go see in 4DX. It's not the right experience for everything, but this is the movie to see in 4DX for sure.
And I saw Mel at a, I don't know if it was the same one, but I saw him at a premiere at the 4DX too, and he's in the seat rocking around. And is it the
Yep.
elements too? Like when there's wind and there, is that
Yeah,
part of the
they have
experience?
like a little mist comes at you at times, and I feel like there's even scents and aromas that come out. Like I don't understand how everything works, and I don't know, what exactly it entails. But like I said, there was smoke, there was atmosphere, there was wind, not mist, and definitely it's like a roller coaster, man. Like you are really moving. I don't know if you saw in that clip any of the other people, but you get rocked around pretty good.
It looks like it. Yeah. I mean, it looks not
It
violent, but
reminds
it's
me of
intense.
Disney when they started to like Muppet Vision, which they're destroying, and they had a lot of they called it 4D, and there was
Yeah,
like you could go to Little Mermaid, and when it rained, the mist would hit you, and so yeah, this is the kind of film that, again, it's a film to have fun, get your
for sure.
popcorn, strap in, and have fun.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I would love to say about this movie, because I grew up watching every action movie I could watch. I was a huge Die Hard fan. I was a huge Speed fan. I saw everything, no matter how poorly done it was, and not a great movie. I saw Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes, and I enjoyed that. And I saw like Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis, and anything I could see in the 90s and early 2000s, I would. And it was an escape for me. And that's why I started making movies, because I wanted to help other people find an escape, just a way to turn off your brain and just be entertained for 2 hours. And the thing about Flight Risk is I finally made a movie like that. And it's really cool to get it out to the whole world, and just know it's a popcorn movie where you can shut off your brain for 2 hours and just have fun.
It seems like, I mean, I don't know if that experience for you, but it seems like such a departure from what you've done up to now. And, was it because like on your Instagram, for example, we've seen some of the plane on the rig, on the gimbal and
Hmm.
all of that. And this kind of volume, I guess, technology, right, was a big part of
Yep,
it.
it
And I
was for
read,
sure.
I read was I interpreting this correctly, Johnny, where and the volume with the imagery that is put up around on those screens or whatever, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that technology that
Sure.
you guys shot a lot of the images that would be used on that
Yeah,
projection.
we
I'm sure you can
we shot almost.
articulate that a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's a gentleman by the name of Michael Ralla. He was our pre-production and on-set visual effects supervisor. He didn't handle the post-production visual effects. That was somebody entirely different. But Michael's a genius, and he really shepherded me through the process. He had done Black Panther and some large movies like that, and he had developed a system of 6 cameras that are in a pinwheel fashion on a platter, and they used them to shoot plates on Black Panther. Marvel requires it, I guess, to shoot plates of all the things they're shooting in case they ever have to go back and fill anything in. So he developed a system, and we partnered with Wild Rabbit Aerial, who actually did the physical manufacture of the system, and it contained six 8K Red V Raptor cameras. And instead of shooting them horizontally, we turned them into portrait mode. So we had more room top to bottom, so that when we got on the volume and put our images up, we could shift the horizon up and down and continue to cover it. And that image ended up being 24K when projected on the volume, which was absolutely incredible. I don't think there's a lot of productions that have projected at that high of a resolution on a volume. But for a movie like this, those images are make or break. If you don't have great plates, it's not even worth using the volume, because it's only as good as what's out those windows, because you can't sell a garbage plate and make it look realistic. So getting those plates was extremely important. We took 3 days to fly through the Sierra Mountains in California here. Fred North, the sort of world famous helicopter pilot, and his DP, Dylan Goss, aerial DP, did all the flying and all the shooting of those plates. Mel and I had gone up in a helicopter and sort of made notes where we wanted to shoot. And then Michael Ralla did an incredible chart of all the places we flagged while we were on that scout with time of day. And then they were just able to check that off and go and fly through. So we had stuff that was sort of at sunset with the mountains. Like, you'll see that scene at the end with Topher Grace against the glass, and we can get into that later because it's one of my favorite parts of the movie. But we needed certain sections of light and certain changes throughout the movie. And so we had to acquire those, like I said, over 3 days. So they came back with all this unbelievable footage. And then Lux Machina, who's a volume company, ran all the on-set playback of everything. And they did an absolutely killer job.
Well, and plates is what I was trying to think of, was the term I was
Yep.
trying to think of, plates. And you mentioned like having to be able to sell it. And I mean, that must be so, it's just as critical for the actors, right? To kind of put them in that setting. And so that's got to be even more critical for their performance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it really, really helps the actors. I mean, there's a behind the scenes piece online if you go watch it where Topher is talking about he's more reacting to what's going on, and just to show you like how immersive and how impressive it is. There was one day I was in there, I was doing some work on my tablet, and they were running tests on it, and it was stationary, it wasn't moving, and all of a sudden they turned it back on, and I literally thought that there was a failure on the gimbal and the plane was falling off the gimbal, and I grabbed my seat, and all it was they had just turned the screens back on. It's like a ride. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, the first time you got in there, there's always the real possibility of an actor getting there the first time and getting motion sick, because it feels amazing.
And you've worked with Mel before as an actor. He was an actor that
Yep.
you were filming. What's it like I know I asked you last time, you got a two-time Academy Award winner, but now you're like shoulder to shoulder with him talking directing. I mean, tell us about that experience. I'd be like speechless.
Yeah, man, it was a film school every day. It was super cool. There was times when I sort of pinched myself and looked, and just he was always right to my left hand side here at the monitors with me. And it was just, there's times where you get really focused on the job and you get so into the minutia of what you're doing. Sometimes you miss things, but there was times where I reminded myself, I'm like, you only get this opportunity probably once to work with a director like this in your career, so pay attention and see what he's doing. And it was really interesting to me to see what he would respond to and what he wouldn't respond to, and when he would talk to the actors and when he wouldn't talk to the actors. And the thing that I found about Mel that I found particularly interesting, he never like inserted himself if he didn't feel like he had to. He'd watch a performance, and if he loved the performance, didn't say anything. And then there was times where he would lock in on the weirdest stuff, and I'm like, I would have never thought of that. But when you go back and you watch his movies, it's those little flourishes, it's those little Melisms that make the movies so interesting. So it was really fun to watch what he was doing and why he would make certain choices.
He seems like a pretty reserved guy to me. And we know recently he lost a house in the fires that are going on out
Right.
there in LA, and the emotion in his eyes, which you see in his acting, but to see it for
Yeah.
real, it was tough to watch. But
Yeah.
like, do you ever, sit there and, joke it up with him, or is it all like
Oh,
business?
oh. No, absolutely. That man has a great sense of humor. We were laughing all the time. and he's got well, the funny thing is when you get somewhere with him in a personal space and you're talking to him, you realize in 30 seconds why he was one of the biggest stars on the planet. Because as soon as he starts to tell a story, you can't take your eyes off him. He's just super compelling and super amusing. And it's just, I heard some of the best stories about the industry that I've ever heard. You know, things from the Lethal Weapon days on up to, you know, very recently. And it's just, it's a blast because it's my childhood. You know, I think we grew up in the same, you know, time frame, and hearing stories from, you know, the set of Signs or the set of Payback, and you know, it was pretty incredible.
Well,
I was priming for the interview and I actually watched Payback last night because I actually hadn't seen it and we talked about it when we first interviewed you.
Really?
So I was
Okay.
able to see the director's cut last night and I just
and both
thoroughly
cuts are
enjoyed it.
great,
So good.
but
I
I think
Dan's, yeah. You're hitting it on, or Mike, sorry, Mike, you're hitting it on the head. Both cuts are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, they're very different movies, and you can see why at the time the studio wanted to pivot and wanted to make a different movie. But they're both fantastic. Like I can't, if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't pick which one I like better.
I'm in the same boat. You know, the first hint I got about Mel was when I got the Fat Man disc and listened to the commentary. And were you guys all in the same room during that?
We were. It was me, Michelle Lang, Ian and Esham Nelms, and Mel, and we are just sitting. It was actually in Ian's basement in his old townhouse. We just were sitting around a computer and just all laughing and having a good time.
And it
That's
sounded
hilarious.
like you guys were having a blast. And Mel was like, you
Yeah.
know, right in there with all of you, chuckling, and it
Yep.
was great fun.
There's some BTS, there's like a I don't know if you call it a featurette, but this whole kind of Mel seems like somebody who doesn't mind poking fun at himself because there's this whole Braveheart bit that he's doing with the sword and the face paint. It's
Yep.
hilarious. So my
It's
thought was he was actually pretty loose on film.
Oh, absolutely. He is so funny. And I don't know if you saw the second one that they released. I think it's even funnier than the first one. It's a bit called "Hit Your Mark" with Michelle.
Yes.
If you haven't seen, okay,
I
yeah,
haven't seen it.
that
I
one's
got
Yes.
to see it.
okay.
Oh,
You'll have to
it's
check it out.
great.
It's brilliant.
It's great.
Now, speaking of Mel, the director, does he storyboard? Because I know Esham storyboards everything, right? When you shoot with the Nelms. How about Mel?
So he has a storyboard artist who I spoke with once or twice, and he drew out a couple of the sequences, but I think it was more just for Mel to get it out of his mind and down on paper because we never reference them on set. Mel is very emotional and very character driven. So we find stuff as we go along a lot of the time. You know, I had rough shot lists of what I knew we needed to do to make our days that I would talk to the AD about, and I showed him to Mel and he looked over them with me. But it was more like he will tell you if there's somewhere particular that he wants a camera or a certain beat that he wants, right? Like there's things like I said that he really latches into and really demands. But other times I think he brings in people that he really trusts and is sort of like bring me your ideas, I will vet the ideas and what's best will get up on the screen. So he's an incredible collaborator in that way. And I mean, just you've seen his other movies. I think he's a genius.
He is.
Yeah, well, it was another I hate to say, but I'm now glad to admit I hadn't seen Hacksaw Ridge, Johnny, and I finally got
Ah,
around to seeing
wow.
that in just the last few weeks or so. So that was so powerful. Which I think was his last directing gig, right? Was Hacksaw
It
Ridge, I
was,
think.
yeah, 2016. So right the same year as Small Town Crime, I think. Well, when we shot Small Town Crime anyway.
This is, you know, if you look at his resume as a director, this is such a departure
Hmm.
because
Yep.
it's not just action, there's humor in it. The first time we looked at the first trailer, Dan was laughing the whole time and I was like, I don't get it. Now having seen
But,
the film, I get it.
yeah,
But this is what made him want to do this film?
that's a good question, and Mel's the only one who could give you that answer. I think he just wanted to do something different. I think he at his core is a filmmaker, and I think he just wanted to get out there and make a movie that was something different than he's ever done before, just to work that muscle. And this is what that movie is. I mean, it's sort of bonkers. It's a contained movie polar opposite of everything he's ever done.
This was impacted by the SAG strike, is that right? Like, this
It
started
was
filming
supposed to
last
come out in
summer?
So
October, right?
Right.
yeah, it's crazy. We had 4 days of shooting left when that strike hit. And by the grace of God, we were an independent film at that time. It wasn't a studio movie at that point. And so we were able to apply for the SAG waiver, and we went dark for exactly 1 day. I didn't know how long we were going to be down. And sort of the terrifying part was it's not like you have an unlimited budget. And I believe if we were down for more than 4 days, we were going to lose our volume and have to finish the last 2 days on green screen, which would have been a real bummer because I think the work we did on the volume is extraordinary.
Yeah, and it was only a 22-day shoot, correct?
Yeah, it was 22 days on set. No, no, you're correct. It was 22 days on the volume, but we had 3 days of plate work. Plus, at the end of the movie, that plane comes in for a landing. So we did the beginning of the landing with a real Cessna approaching the runway, hitting the runway, and bouncing twice before we shot all the stuff on stage. And then we came back to a different airport. The first airport was in Bishop, California. And then the second airport was in Mesquite, Nevada. So that sequence is put together with two completely different airports. And I don't think you notice it because of everything that's going on and the way we photographed it. But yeah, it's two completely different places. So we had 3 days prior, we had the 22-day shoot, and then we had 2 days at the end where we did that final sequence that takes place on the runway, plus plate photography to put in the CG elements of that final scene.
Now, I haven't seen the behind the scenes footage, and I'm hoping you guys filmed because now with the fires and stuff, I don't know if the DVD when it comes out, will it have extras? Have you shot that stuff? Or do did you do a commentary or anything like that?
I actually don't know. So it'll give me a good reason to check in with Mel and find out.
And the other question I think both Dan and I have talked about, you know, was this space as tight as it looked? And how do you place cameras
Mhm.
in
So
such a tight
yeah,
space to
let me explain to you how tight it was. I am not a tall gentleman. I'm 5'7", and I could not stand upright in that airplane. I had to bend over. So it's extremely tight in that airplane, and it was a real Cessna 208B Grand Caravan, and we had to put it on a gimbal, a hydraulic gimbal that was 10 to 12 feet off the ground. And if you watch the movie, you see how much that thing bucks around and vibrates. That's all real. I mean, if you watch the ropes and the net and the cargo net on the back and stuff, everything moves, right? And that's because it was moving the entire time. Like, that's that effect in itself, having it on that gimbal coupled with the amazing plates and then sort of how we moved and placed camera, I think sells the illusion of being up in the air so well. I mean, I invited my cousin to the movie the other night, and he brought his fiance and a buddy of his old college roommate, and the college roommate and the girlfriend thought that it was filmed in a real plane while flying. They're Hollywood outsiders, you know. And so the fact that they said that just made me, super happy because that was, yeah, absolutely. If you can fool the general audience, that's all you need to do, you know. And it was so important. Mel and I had watched another movie, and it was clearly all shot on green screen. And Mel was taken out of the movie a bunch of times. He felt like it felt fake. And so when I was designing what we were going to do and all my conversations with him, it was figuring out how we could make this as realistic as possible. And like I said, that all started with Michael Ralla and the acquisition of the plates, and then finding the right people. This company, NACMO, did the hydraulic gimbal. They did a killer job. Then my lighting programmer and my gaffer is a guy by the name of Andy Lorenz, and my lighting programmer, a guy by the name of Elton James. And the combination of those two guys to help me sculpt the lighting and all the lighting changes and everything that goes on while that plane is flying was key. And I mean, Elton's done everything from Guardians of the Galaxy 3 to Way of Water, and he just did Superman. So I had a top-notch crew who was really dialed in, but syncing those effects from the lighting to the volume to the screen, so you're matching everything is no small task, and I think we pulled it off really well.
So would
well,
you say this is more, difficult a shoot than the traditional on location, you know?
I wouldn't say more difficult, but it's extremely challenging. There's a lot of D, DIY stuff in this movie. We when the sun would move in this movie, the way I would have loved to have done it, I would have loved to have gotten a telescopic techno crane and put a big light head on the end of it to have the sun move across the plane, right? Because the plane itself can't turn. It's facing one direction on the volume. You're moving the plates, right? So I had to come up with a solution how I was going to make it feel like the sun was going across the plane or changing sides of the plane. So what we did was we came up with a solution where in the back half of the horseshoe of the volume, because it was 270 degrees, we put two mover lights up at the top that we had controlled, real powerful mover lights. And then in the open end, we put two lights on stands. So we had four lights that we could use as the source of the sun. And then what we would do is we had a 20-foot by 40-foot panel, an LED panel over the top of the airplane. It was massive. And so what I would do is I would start one of the lights on, blaring in the back, say the back corner of it, right? And then what would happen is that light would slowly fade out, and then Elton, my lighting programmer, would bring a circle that he had made across the top panel, right? And then it would pick up on the other side. So it was on a light on the other side. So we had to do all this sort of DIY stuff to fake things, but it all ended up working, and you get kind of a charge out of that because you have to figure it out. And when you do, you're like, it's amazing that we came up with this and it worked.
You mentioned DIY. I mean, it makes me think of a lot of this. I don't know if beyond Mark's performance, but at least from what I've read, a lot of that was improvised. A lot of the dialogue is that true?
Yep. Yeah, I think I've heard. I mean, I've heard that too. But yeah, for being on set, there's definitely Mark was having a good time. He really got into the character. Once that hair came off, he was a different person.
Yeah.
And this is, like, totally against type for him, right? 'Cause,
Absolutely.
he's
Yeah.
always the good guy or even in, what's the
Well,
Scorsese
well,
film?
it's been since '96 when he was in
Departed.
Fear
Yeah, Departed.
Yeah.
that he played
I
a real
right,
bad guy. But that's
Fear,
true. Departed, yeah, he wasn't the most likable guy there either, but
but
he was on the right side of
he was on
things.
the right side.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you got
It's not been since, like
him
you said, Fear in '96 was the last time he really, played a
and
bad guy.
it seemed like he was having fun with it.
Oh, he was having a blast. I mean, there's times that like there's a shot in the movie, and it's one of my favorite shots where he's tied up to the rear chair, and the camera's sliding in across the ground, and his head is down, and he lifts his head up, and you see his eyes, and there's this twinkle from the eye lights in his eyes, and it's so Jack Nicholson in The Shining. It's crazy. Like he just looks insane.
He really does. It's so
And
Yeah.
maniacal.
I gotta give credit to, Topher Grace, who I hadn't seen in
Mm.
a while, but I remember his first film was Traffic with Soderbergh,
Right.
and
Mm.
this seemed like it was written for him because there's a little schizophrenia in the script where it's funny and it's serious, and he
Right.
was the guy that could do he could make these quips. You think of a guy that's chained up is not gonna make these humorous quips, but it worked, I
Right.
think, because of him.
Trying to say he's really good at navigating tone like that, going from the serious to the snarky little quips and back and forth. That's something that you got to find the right actor to do, and I think he did it really well.
And he becomes a very sympathetic character, which, you don't see really coming. And Michelle and him carried a big chunk of this film.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Michelle she's brilliant. There's there's one scene. Yeah, there's one scene in the movie where and I'm not going to give anything away, but man, she runs the gamut of emotion from one thing to the next thing, and it's just super powerful, man. The only thing I had seen Michelle in before doing this movie with her was Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman, which I thought she was great in. I'd never seen Downton Abbey, but man, she is a talented actress, just down to her American accent, which I thought was particularly good.
See, I didn't know she was not American.
She's
Well,
yeah, she's British.
She pulled it
Downton
off.
Abbey. Downton Abbey didn't give it away, Mike.
I've
But
never seen it. I haven't seen
oh,
that,
come on, you
so
have it all on Blu-ray. Um,
It's-
well, it's
sounds like we
it's
need to have a Downton Abbey watching party.
exactly, yeah. It's funny too because there's a lot of characters as well that you never see that are in the film,
Yep.
right? They're
Yeah.
dispatchers and people back, and And one when we did a first look on the film a while back, and I remember going through the credits, and I said to Mike, I said, "Geez, one of my favorite comedic actresses of all time is credited in the film, Leah Remini."
Yep.
I was so excited, and then I never got to see her. I did get to hear her quite a bit, but how
Right.
is that all done? Sort of somewhere else after the
Yeah,
fact? I mean,
that's all done post. I mean, it was like script supervisor or Mel's assistant or a producer, somebody else just reading lines off camera. And so to hear what was on set compared to what's in the final movie, it's night and day. Because Hassan, to hear his voice, like I really enjoyed the character and I really enjoyed that arc of the movie. So to hear him kind of come to life was fun for me.
you got to be comfortable being on camera because I mean the shots are so tight. I mean, just getting
Well,
right in there on their faces and
Well, and to that point, I mean, that was a real technical challenge for me, knowing that I had no cutaway walls. Because, and I started to say this earlier and I got sidetracked, but because the plane is 10 to 12 feet off the ground on this gimbal and it's rocking around and moving, there was no safe way to cut away any parts of that airplane. So the only thing that was removable were the front windows and all the side windows. And I had to pick a camera system that was small enough and compact enough to work within that space where if I needed to be against the wall, 3 inches from an actor's face, I could do it. So we went with the Sony Venice, which is, it's a full size camera, but they make this breakaway portion, which is called the Rialto. So it's basically the sensor block comes off the camera body and you put the lens on it. And you're just holding onto the sensor block. So it's only about this big in the end. So we chose to use that camera so we could get in spaces because back to where Mel wanted realism in this movie, he didn't want anything to draw you out of the movie. I wanted to put the camera up for the most part in only places where it could actually physically go. And if you watch the movie, there's not a lot of shots. There's not a lot of like Fincher shots where you're tracking through the sky and all of a sudden whoosh you go through a digital windshield and you're in the plane. I didn't want to do anything like that. I wanted to keep it as grounded as possible. And the same thing to the lenses too. I had explored shooting anamorphic, but I realized when you're shooting anamorphic, like right away, it was never going to work because close focus, like I said, you'd be 3 inches away from an actor at times. And anamorphic lenses generally don't focus that close. And if I have to be 4 feet away from an actor, it was never going to work in that setting. So we went spherical lenses, and we used the Sony Venice too. And we did a lot of it on gimbal when we didn't have to be right in front of somebody's face.
mm. So was it? I imagine there was advantages having worked with Mel on Fat Man before going into this. I mean, obviously it's in a different capacity, but that had to have
Mhm.
created some sort of shorthand between the two of you, I think.
It did. I mean, if nothing else, it let us know that we got along well enough that we'd worked together once on set before. We had a good rapport. We've had a good rapport ever since we wrapped. And the fact that he asked me to do that movie is a highlight of my career because we're talking about the guy who did Apocalypto, Hacksaw Ridge, Passion of the Christ. So to get that call was exciting for me. And I already knew that I liked him and I enjoyed being on set with him. Now I knew it was going to be a different capacity and I didn't know what to expect. And, like I haven't told a whole lot of people, but I went online and I scoured the internet for behind the scenes videos of him to see how he was working with his DPs because we had never had that conversation. So I was trying to pick up little hints of how he worked. It's amazing how little footage there is from The Passion, from Hacksaw Ridge, from Apocalypto of him working behind the scenes, and almost never with the DP is there any footage that I could find. So it was sort of a guessing game to how that would play out, but it worked out extremely well.
I think of going way back to Lethal Weapon, the first one, when I saw it, and how deep his character was, but he also had this funny side where he was like a Three Stooges fan, and I think he brought that from
Right?
his real life into the film.
I you're probably right there.
Has anybody ever accused you of resembling a young Mel?
And no, the funny part is I've gotten over the years Topher Grace, which I don't get. But there was even a day where Mel was like, "Man, Topher reminds me of somebody. I can't remember who it is." And then finally he's like, "Johnny, he looks like Johnny." So when I got on set and I met Topher for the first time, he's like, "Hey, I hear people are saying we look alike." And so Topher and I hit it off real well from the bat.
That's great.
So
Now you
yeah.
mentioned you mentioned Mel's Passion of the Christ, and it's it's already out that you're working on the follow up to that. So is there a chance that perhaps you might have some involvement on that film? I probably couldn't say anyways, but
It remains to be seen.
And we're still hoping, because I know when Dick Donner died, he said they were going to do a Lethal Weapon 5, and you've worked with
Sure.
Danny Glover too.
I
So I'd
have.
love to see
I've done
you.
my two parts of Lethal Weapon, just never together. So maybe we can make that one happen. We'll bring it back
That would
together.
be nice.
so aside from
Yep.
working with Mel and the rest of the cast, what's the standout of working on this project, Flight Risk?
There's a sequence in the movie that was something that I had never done before, was super challenging, that I'm really proud of. That last section where the plane comes in for a landing is something that, as a cinematographer, it was, over 20 years of experience that came into play. I had an airplane approaching an airfield where Mel wanted the final sequence to be at night on the ground. And there's not enough firepower on any production to light an airplane that's coming in from, a mile away on approach. So I had to figure out how I was going to see that airplane in the air to it getting to the ground and to it coming to a stop. And the only solution was to shoot everything at blue hour, which is about a 90-minute window before you completely lose the sun. It's after, magic hour, after that golden sun is gone. It's just that last tail end of light. And I had to shoot as much of that as possible to get the plane approaching, which there's an amazing shot you can see that Fred North and Dylan did from behind the airplane as it sort of veers off at one point. And you can see there's just enough detail in it that you can see it's got this real cool blue tone to it. You can see, the ground, the airport, what's around it. You can read the airplane. When we look back up to the plane coming through the sky with the emergency vehicles waiting, you can see just enough light to read the plane coming in. But by the time that plane stops moving, it's night. And I had a cell that could happen in that 5 minutes. And so it was a real daunting task to know that I had roughly 180 minutes to shoot with a helicopter and some ground cameras. And I only got 2 days to do it. And if we didn't get it, we didn't get it. But I needed to get that plane coming in, bouncing twice, and then the plane had to take off after it bounced twice. So that's what we did. So we spent 2 days doing that. And when I say 2 days, I mean 2 90-minute days getting that stuff. And I had to make sure we had enough coverage with that to tie in to the volume, because I needed the pieces of them reacting on the volume, which if you watch, it's really cool because on the volume, the plane, like I said, is always facing forward, right? So what I did was the plane is supposed to be spinning. I'm spinning the plates on the volume and they're shaking the plane, and Topher and Michelle are reacting to that. They're really always facing forward. And it's incredible because it sells amazingly well. So you have that piece, you have the real plane, and then we had to shoot plates where we're flying at times a drone down the runway and weaving between the emergency vehicles so you can see things flying down the runway. So it's 3 layers. It's visual effects plate shots to add a visual effects plane. It's a real plane coming in, and it's stuff on the volume. And to marry all that together with the time change from that blue hour to night was tremendously difficult. But I think that sequence is amazing.
That is a really good looking shot for sure. Yeah. Geez, I mean, far more creative obstacles than I would have ever imagined. It was more
Yeah.
initially. It was just like I told Mike. I said, I'm just so fascinated by the constraints that kind of setup,
Right.
And we wondered if
presents.
you were in the air at times.
Right.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that's cool because it's one of these things where when I read the script, Mel sent the script to me during the pandemic, and he had asked me to do the movie, and then it went away, and I thought the project was dead. And then I was down visiting Esham Nelms. I was walking around downtown Temecula with his girlfriend, and I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up, and it was a line producer saying, "Hey, Mel's making a movie, and he wants you to be his DP. Are you available?" And in that situation, there's only one answer. Like, it was an immediate yes, and then I was going to figure out the rest later. But the crazy part is when you read a script like that, it reads as so contained and so straightforward. You're like, oh, this is going to be easy. And then you start to think about it. You're like, how do I give this life for 90 minutes? Like, it's one location. I'm not just going to set cameras up and just let it roll. Like, you got to keep it compelling. And I think we largely do that with the lighting. I think that the shift in day is brilliant to start it in normal daylight and you get cloud looks, you get hard sun looks, you get magic hour looks, and then that blue look. And I think my favorite is probably right before they approach the runway. There's like this beautiful purple color in the sky, and the lights on the dash come on for the first time, and the look drastically changes. And then to figure out where to put the camera and how to move the camera, I had a brilliant camera operator by the name of Sam Willie, who's probably the best gimbal operator in the world. And so he was in there on what we call a butt dolly, which is basically like a roller chair that you would find at a dentist's office, with his gimbal rig sliding around. And there's some really cool BTS where you can see him bouncing around as the plane rocks as he's filming. So we had to figure out how to give it life and keep it interesting for, I think we're in that plane for 75 or 80 minutes of the movie.
Well, we appreciate you giving away these secrets, and it takes me
Yeah.
back to another David Lynch quote where he met Billy Wilder, and he was talking. One of his favorite movies was Sunset Boulevard, and Billy
Okay.
Wilder said, that mansion on Sunset Boulevard, it wasn't on Sunset Boulevard, and it ruined the movie for David Lynch. It was like when a magician does a trick
Oh
and you
no.
find out how he does it, it kind of wrecks it for you. But with filming, it's kind of, for me anyways, it makes it more interesting, more exciting.
Yeah, there's a great online site called Filmmakers World that I religiously go to. It's an Instagram page because you get those insights on how other people are doing things, and it's amazing. I think that's as fascinating as the scenes themselves sometimes. And I'm gonna do a couple of these breakdowns myself so people see how we did that sequence at the end of the movie and some of the other things, because the volume is a fascinating technology that not a lot of people have done on this level. I mean, like what we did was sort of unheard of. We built our own volume in Las Vegas. It wasn't a pre-existing volume. We built this thing. It was 33 feet high by 65 feet wide by 65 feet deep and 270 degrees. So it was massive. And I have to credit David Meyer, my production designer, because he took a CAD program. I can't remember the name of what it was, but he took the virtual plane and he put it on a virtual gimbal in this virtual space. And then we took a virtual camera and put it in there and looked around. And we figured out like the angles that I would conceivably shoot and how high and how wide this volume would need to be versus our budget to see what we could do. And that's how we settled on the 270 degrees and the size of the volume itself.
Wow. The technology is amazing for sure.
Yeah.
It
Well,
really is.
considering all those obstacles, I mean, kudos. Great job. You pulled it
Have you
off.
talked
And
to Mel this weekend with the
yeah.
opening, or
I've texted with him.
okay?
Okay. Okay. We'll leave it there. We won't pry for any
Perfect. I
details there.
appreciate
You know,
that. Yeah.
before we let you go, we didn't get to do this when we had you on the first time, but we always like to close out the interviews with getting our guests' top 5 films. So I was going to ask for your top
Ooh.
5 bourbons, but I thought let's just keep it consistent with the theme of the show. What
That's,
would be your
I
top five
like it.
films as of today?
Well, as of today, top 5 films. So the movie that got me into filmmaking, like I was always a huge fan of movies, and I think we probably talked about this the first time. It was my escape, and that's how I fell in love with the filmmaking process. Just like it was something that I wanted to give back to other people that escape. And the movie for me, the first time that really like played games with my head, and I was like, wait a second, I've been fleeced this entire time along, was The Usual Suspects. So I think that's probably at the top of the list as far as my favorite movie of all time is probably The Usual Suspects. Uh, then the other ones are going to get a little bit lighter and really hit on the kind of movies that I grew up with. I mean, I would put Die Hard up there. I would put Beverly Hills Cop up there without question. That's 3. I know I'm going to forget something. There's a couple more serious and heavy hitters that I'm going to blank on right now. I just did this a couple months ago too. I wrote down my favorite movies, and it's going to bum me that I can't come up with it right now.
Should we throw
But
Payback in there just for the sake of, they'll throw
I
Mel a
mean,
little
I,
bit?
I think if I'm gonna put a Mel movie in there, I would probably go with Signs. Like Signs is just the craftsmanship in that movie is unbelievable. If you look at every shot feels purposeful, and the emotion of that movie it's just incredible. I mean, I saw it when I was in my early 20s and I didn't have kids and I didn't have kids in my life at the time, but the scene at the end of or in the middle of that movie where his son is having an asthma attack and they're in the basement and they can't get out and he's just holding it against his chest and he's just saying breathe with me, like that guts me now when I see that scene, because I can picture the children in my own life in that situation. It's just like really powerful. So yeah, I don't know that it would be top 10. I don't know that I put it in the top 5. I'm just now it's really going to drive me crazy because I think I wrote them down in my phone. Um,
Oh no.
Movies
which
are so powerful. And again, I
We'll
saw a
smooth it
movie
out
when
in
I was in
post.
junior high called Injustice for All with
Oh
Al
yeah.
Pacino,
oh,
and
interesting.
that made me go to law school. And in my first year of law
Really?
school, I'm sitting in the living room and Injustice for All comes on, and I'm watching it. And I'm like, holy shit, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an actor. I really liked Al Pacino.
I mean, that's why I almost went into criminal justice. Like the
Yeah, we
first
Right.
talked
year
about that
of,
last
yeah,
time.
I was
Yeah.
enrolled to go to study law enforcement, and my parents were like, "Fine, can you find something safer?" And like I said,
Yeah.
had they not said that and been concerned about my safety, I'd probably be somewhere right now working in criminal justice and not as happy as I am right now.
Yeah. Be Homicide: Life in the Street starring Johnny
That,
Derango.
by the way, favorite TV show of all time.
Of
Homicide: Life in the Streets
course.
is
Of
my
course.
favorite show ever. You know what? I don't know that I'm gonna find it, so maybe this can be an addendum. I'll send you guys my
We'll
list, and
make it.
you
Yeah,
can put it on
we'll
the
put that
website.
up. And
All
then
right.
yeah, it'll be in the
But
post
definitely those
credits.
3. Definitely Beverly Hills Cop, unsung or not unsung hero. Yeah, I'll put unsung hero there.
Yeah,
Unsung
that's
Beverly
a
Hills
Heroes,
great one.
great
Cop,
film. Great film.
Die Hard, and The Usual Suspects.
I love that. Yeah,
So
Usual Suspects. That's a great Bryan Singer, right? Bryan Singer, I think.
it was Bryan Singer, yeah,
And
and
that's
Chris McQuarrie, who's gone on to have an unbelievable career of his own.
oh, for sure. Speaking of
Yeah.
another one of your projects, though, we have any update on Everyone Is Doing Great season 2? Like that, we know that's
Oh,
in the
yeah.
can, right? Are we still
Still
trying to find
still in
a
the
home
works,
for
but
that?
I will tell you the disappointing part about that is they did not bring back my park ranger character. I know you guys were all hoping that I would get a spin-off. Hasn't happened yet.
Terrible. Yeah, what was the name? Marty Mc something or other? Forget.
Squirrel McMasterson is
Squirrel
what I named him.
McMasterson
With the toque.
with the
So,
toque. Yeah.
yes, with the toque. Yeah, me and Naw's character who played the librarian, we're gonna get a spin-off, but they've already canceled us.
Oh,
It's so good. We got to get that back. We got to get that back. So
It, it'll
what it'll
it's
find a
in
home.
process.
Okay.
Yeah, it
okay,
will find
We'll
a
good.
home.
get there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You will definitely see the second season, which is it's interesting too because for me, season 2, I was not available. I was in another film while that was shooting, so I was only around for about half the season, and I of course was an executive producer on that, so I was on set for the second half of the season. But watching that was a completely different experience because for me, I was a viewer at that point, and it was cool to watch the second season unfold, having not filmed every frame of it. And it was a really different experience for me and a really cool experience. And I think people are really gonna like season 2 when they see it.
We've been waiting.
yeah, we can't wait
Anything
for that
else
one to come out.
brewing in
Yeah,
the
what do you
Nelms
got in the works?
universe or
The Nelms are always hard at work. Yeah, they've got a bunch of things up in the air, so hopefully sooner than later. And then I myself am heading out to do a Lionsgate feature here in Nashville in about 3 weeks.
well, it must have been nice to finally have Lionsgate promote your film. I mean, this film, Flight Risk,
Wow.
got a lot of
Yeah.
promotion.
Everywhere, right? Like I'm a huge football fan, so I watched all the college bowl games. That commercial was everywhere during the college bowl games. I'm a huge NFL fan, so every playoff game, the commercial was running. I mean, they did a really great job of getting it out. I've seen billboards. I've seen people have sent me pictures of the sides of buses from Scotland and Ireland, which have Mark Wahlberg's face and Flight Risk all over them. So, yeah, it was kind of a different experience because I've made some great films, but this was the most heavily promoted by far.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. The word is out on Flight Risk. Well, Johnny, congratulations. Number one film at the box office, Flight Risk. It's great to have you back. We were really eagerly anticipating chatting with you. Can't
I,
believe it's been 4 almost 5 years, but
it's amazing, man. I'm so glad to come back and talk to you guys. You guys are the best.
Yeah.
well,
Well,
we know you've got a birthday coming up around the corner too. So happy early birthday to
It's
you as
true.
well. Yeah, just
Appreciate
around the
that.
corner. Yeah. Well, thanks, Johnny. Congratulations again. It's good to have you on the show, and we hope to get you back soon. Maybe we'll be talking. Everyone is doing great season 2.
yeah.
Would love that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
right.
Johnny.